of the Serpent. But my associates and I formed the Fraternity of the Sanctum, Regnum. And it's been living and breathing, going through periods of vitality and decline and cycles of rebirth ever since the early 80s.
Now, the FSR has done a number of publications, journals, CDs, and things like that.
Well, we always try to keep up with the cutting edge of technology, sometimes to our peril, because in the early 80s we made a video recording using very primitive equipment of some of the rites that we'd adapted and evolved from the Order of the Cubic Stone curriculum. Those tapes are possibly, unfortunately for some of us, still in existence. And they show a very embryonic technology at the time. If we were to replicate, that attempt now, I'm sure the end result would be a lot more professional. But yes, we started off producing video and various pamphlets, still based on the old Xerox system, and moved through the 90s, really, in a variety of guises. As I say, any group lives and breathes. There are times when the Order of the Cubic Stone itself has been down to less than a handful of people, and then at other times it could hold hundreds of different adherents, the grade of probation and the chorus neophytes, and the higher adepts, of course. But these things live and breathe, and as we've learnt to roll with the punches and roll with the changes and evolve through adaptation, you may have seen our work surfacing from little groups such as the New Age Knights Templar, which were a follow-on from the New Ordo Templi, the Order of the Templars of Nuit of the early 90s. We produced a cassette recording of the Book of the Law, which was published by Ron Bonds of Illuminate Press. God rest his soul.
Right. We used the first chapter from that on the podcast. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh, yes, I remember. I was very pleased to hear it again. Associates of mine still have copies of the original cassette. I haven't one myself. So I was I do believe, yes, you sent me, I believe, some MP3s. That's right. Thank you for those. That's the only copy I possess of those. But if I need access, I can get hold of a copy from my friends, I guess. But yes, that was quite a historic recording, because I believe a friend of mine came back from America and brought back the Principia Discordia, which Illuminate, Ron Bonds, had published. And we thought, well, these guys are okay. Let's see if they'll go for this. And as it turned out, he was publishing a cycle of books on aliens, on intelligences from other worlds or other dimensions, some specific references to Crowley's Book of the Law. And so it was quite a synchronicity that a meaningful coincidence that we should contact him at that time. And he was very good enough to put our work out in the Americas. But we've since made a possibly a more definitive version of the Book of the Law, which I believe you played a sample from the other month. And that's one of our most recent recordings. What happened during the 80s and the 90s, although the ritual, the Kabbalistic side of ritual, a ritual inquiry and Kabbalistic attunement was very much emphasized during the 80s. During the 90s, we possibly loosened up a bit, went a little more ecological, and starting to have more involvement with ecological issues and taking care of the garden of creation and really earthing our work in Malkuth. In the mid-90s, I had the birth of my children, Kestrel and Alex, and we decided to cease operations ritually during the first few years of their lives, of course, because the atmospheres generated around esoteric workings, of course, shouldn't be young, growing, wonderful human beings shouldn't be exposed to haphazard influences. And so I believe that's when I took up university and did a late mature, as a mature student, a late degree in interactive multimedia. And I believe that was when we started to actually gather the work together from the 80s and the early 90s and put them out on CD format to synthesize and crystallize the best of what we had to offer and put it in a format that was easily assimilated by the listening or the interested public. Yeah.
So I guess you have a Qabalah series. It's called the Book of Calls, the Hermetic Qabalah, and you also have some an introductory lecture about the Qabalah, the 50 Gates.
Yes, well, I believe the stuff that we've put out, the material that we've put out on the CDs is important because it focuses purely upon the Hermetic Qabalah as opposed to the purely religious Qabalah and the mysticism of the rabbinical Jews, of course, much of which is incorporated into the Western Hermetic tradition. But I find more and more as celebrities such as Madonna and Britney Spears and who knows who from MTV have gotten into the Qabalah as a way of being, a path of self-discovery, all of which I applaud. The ground rules as to what is this Qabalah have been somewhat confused. In the West, we've often based our understanding of the Qabalah on what we term the Rosicrucian tradition. In itself a tradition which is prone to a tradition of a transmission of information historically, which has been prone to interference patterns through wars, revolutions, the Black Death, the Crusades, and it's as if we have a fragmentation of knowledge that was brought together by some of the Latin scholars, Kircher and von Rosenroth, who was translated by MacGregor Mathers of the Golden Dawn. And these elements of what is often referred to as Masonic Kabbalism provide what we would term the Rosicrucian Qabalah with its blood and guts, really, with its very meat. This has often been lost when examining the Qabalah from the point of view of a purely religious, passive perspective, when the proactive magical side of evolving oneself within this work of personal evolution, this tends to get lost in the mix in the religious passive side. I remember Gerald York on a radio documentary upon the subject of Crowley's life, saying that the Golden Dawn was full of people of two camps. One was sitting at the feet of the deity, and the other camp were trying to become the deity. And I think that those of us who tread the Rosicrucian path have some respect for the divinity within ourselves, within our very selves. And we're attempting to rationalize the Rosicrucian Qabalah is an attempt to, it's a talismanic referencing system, which gives us a sense of identification with our aspirations, with our, not our emotional aspirations, but our spiritual aspirations, those aspects of the self that are capable of communing with the higher aspirational forces of the conscience. So we are very much involved as an order with providing the materials through which people can reference their own Qabalah. There's things like 777, tables of correspondence, angelic calls, planetary invocations, all the hardcore nuts and bolts of the blueprints of the traditional Western Qabalah. But we are really interested in cultivating the individual so that they can discover themselves, build their own personal referencing system, and stand on the shoulders of the giants such as Crowley and Mathers. So our small initiative hopefully will be appreciated either historically or in some cultural context. And it is indeed a pleasure to be involved in the active participation of the work of the Golden Dawn tradition, of which I'm very keen to include Aleister Crowley, who much of the Golden Dawn school have disassociated themselves from.
Now, you also talk in some of your writings about the influence of Dion Fortune and her Qabalah.
Indeed, the very spot upon which I'm standing whilst I'm talking to you is only about 200 feet away from where she's buried, on the not so much the slopes of Glastonbury Tor, but on the lower foothills in the cemetery of Glastonbury in Somerset in England. And I have a very personal relationship with Dion Fortune's work because when I entered my initial period of study, I was given her Mystical Qabalah, her book, which I've grown to love and hate and then learned to love again throughout many cycles of my own development. But Dion Fortune's take is one of personal revelation, one of cultivating the self with the respect for the deity, the creator of the universe. I have a very deep personal love of Dharma Fortune's spirit and the spirit with which she approached the work, which was one of honest sincerity and imagination. This is very much a case of a woman on her own, going out into the world in the 1920s and investigating areas of human psychology and the esoteric areas of inquiry as a lone wolf, really. I don't believe she ever found personal happiness save within her work, but I'm honoured that I was brought to the path through reading her work, and every day in my heart talk to her a little bit. It's being so close to where she lies now, and I'm very grateful and thankful for her revelation of the esoteric knowledge.
Well, let's get into the Qabalah, the 50 Gates, the book that you've written, and you're re-releasing a revised edition with a new publishing company.
Indeed, yeah. Vondel Park, who issued the CDs, we're pressing a few for the Americas, mainly because we've only been available in British bookshops or through Amazon.co.uk, and I think this is something to do with the post 9/11 impact upon international business. A few things were disrupted back then. I believe even Wiser were having trouble getting stock just after 9/11, and they're in America. But certainly the world's been standing back in shock since then, and we live in a different world. So really, I found that the audience with which my CDs have reached has mainly been in the Americas. And as we have a mail order turnaround of, I think it takes less than 7 days for our mail to reach many parts of the States via airmail, we've had a great response. So I thought it was really up to myself, really, to promote my own work in the Americas, and hopefully support the first edition, which is available through Mandrake over here. So I've gone to the lulu.com, and our website is, or our store on lulu.com is /Qabalah, lulu.com/Qabalah. So a variety of works will pop up on there, but we have the advantage of being able to print in America and print in Spain. So whether we're reaching a European audience or an audience in the Americas, everyone's assured of a pretty swift delivery.
Excellent. Now, I read the new introduction, and it starts off kind of quoting Karen Armstrong and pointing out that in the past there was this mythological understanding of existence, and it was more of a narrative of myth than actual literal reasoning. But now people approach things through a logical deductive reasoning, and that's kind of stripped a lot of the narrative and myth out of people's lives. And I found your contrast between that and how the Qabalah could help bring that myth back in. If you'll indulge me to read a paragraph here, it says, "The concepts of the Hermetic Qabalah are ideal tools to assist in the mining of some of the subcontextual ideas inherent in the mix of our everyday personal reality. These illusions of subcontext, elements of racial unconsciousness, or archetypes of timeless relevance, which commonly furnish our dreams, are often revealed in feelings of déjà vu, synchronicities of time and space, and numerological coincidences which plague us. This is the stuff, mythic personal signs and augurs fathomed only by the circumstance of the individual." What I like about this is you're taking the Qabalah into a different direction. Instead of it just being the paths and the spheres and everybody learning it, you're saying, yes, you need to learn those aspects. You need to learn the paths, the spheres, the correspondences, but then take those and use it to create your own personal mythos. Can you explain a little more about what that is and how the 50 Gates is a manifestation of that?
Sure. We have to start on the basic principle that the Tree of Life is a blueprint, which gives us a referencing system. So we can communicate between ourselves various ideas and understand their place within any particular area or blueprint of the blueprint of creation. At